Okay. Okay.
Okay, so hopefully you should see my slide that has some pictures of plants with funny tents over them.
Yep.
And so what I'm going to talk to you about today are some experiments that I have been doing. I started doing shade cloth experiments in 2018, and I've been doing some experiments with shade cloth every year since then. So I'll be talking about the two crops that we found them to be really useful in are lettuce and bell peppers. So that's what I'm going to focus on. And I need to figure out how to make this go forward. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the reasons why we wanted to try working with shade cloth is because this is a technique that's been used for quite a while in tropical areas. It's being used in the US, in the southern part of the US, and also in some Western states. It's used in Israel. It's used one of my coworkers who was in the Peace Corps in the Seychelles said that they used shade houses there back when he was in the Peace Corps in the 1980s. So we thought we'd do some work with shade cloth. Shade cloth reduces the soil and air temperatures that are experienced by the crop. And the other big reason that they're often used is because they can reduce incidence of sunburn on fruiting crops. And because you're reducing the temperatures, you're also reducing the rate of transpiration in a lot of cases, and stress on the plants related to drought can be reduced. So you're reducing crop water requirements in a lot of cases by using shade cloth. And that lovely picture there is what can happen when your pepper fruit get sunburnt, which I'm guessing a lot of people who grow peppers have experienced this. Often happens when your plants don't have enough leaves because they're not growing vigorously, or you get a storm that blows a bunch of leaves to one side and the plants get turned sideways, and then you have sudden exposure to the sun. Or when we get a lot of bright, sunny, cloudless days in a row. Okay, so just in general, how shade cloth is usually used in vegetables, 30% shade cloth, which means it's blocking 30% of the light, or approximately so, is what's usually recommended for vegetables. There are all sorts of different percentages that are available because shade cloth is used in the horticultural industry for ornamental plants, for plants that really like to grow in shaded areas under trees. So there's really high percent shades. People also use it to shade their pool or their deck. And so those like 70 and 80% shade cloth is not what you want to use for vegetables because you won't get enough light transmission for the crop to grow well. The shade cloth will have to be placed over some sort of structure in nearly all cases. So you can use a existing high tunnel frame with or without the plastic film on it. You can use low tunnels, same deal, with or without the like clear plastic film on it. In stake crops like peppers and tomatoes, you'll see in my experiments, I just drape the shade cloth over the pepper stakes, and I put stakes in my lettuce to drape the shade cloth over, and that's how I supported it. There are also like more complicated support structures that are used to put shade cloth on horizontally. So if you had large rectangular field that you wanted to shade cloth, people do use such techniques, sometimes like supported by wires. And then if you're draping the shade cloth over like a low tunnel or over stakes, then you need to secure it to ground somehow. I use tent stakes, or in the past I have also used landscape staples. You can use sandbags, like we often use for a strawberry row cover, or you can buy large pieces and put grommets in it, or these little plastic clips, and then you can tie it down with twine or string. So I'm going to talk about the lettuce experiments I did first, and then I'm going to talk about the peppers. So the lettuce experiments, the thing I've looked at with lettuce is different colors of shade cloth. So there are many options for colors available. Some of them are used in the horticultural industry for certain types of ornamental plants, and they're supposed to have certain attributes as far as promoting fruiting or leaf growth. So I wanted to look at some of the different colors that were available and using that in combination with some varieties of lettuce that I knew were heat tolerant from past variety trials that I did versus varieties that were heat susceptible. So for this experiment, which I conducted in 2018 and then repeated it in 2019, I used two Arroyo and Salvias as two romaine types, and then two butterhead types, Skyphos and Alkindus, and Arroyo and Skyphos were the heat tolerant varieties. So the timeline for this, just so you generally know when I seeded these in early to mid-March and transplanted second week of April, basically, and then put the shade on in 2018 in early May. And then in May of 2019, we had a very cold start to May, and I did not put the shade cloth on until towards the end of May. And you can see that we had slightly later harvest in 2019 than in 2018. And then over to the left on this slide, you can see the different shade treatments that I had. So of course I had unshaded control, and then 30% black shade cloth, 30% aluminate, which is a shiny aluminized, really reflective shade cloth. And then it is impossible, or at least was then, to find 30% white shade cloth. So I had two different levels of white shade cloth, lower than the recommended 30 and higher than the recommended 30, because I really wanted to see what white shade cloth would do. And then red and blue. So a blue shade cloth is supposed to promote leaf growth, at least that's what they say on the ornamental side. So I was curious about how that would do for the lettuce. So, and then that picture there is we're about to start harvesting. We've taken the shade cloth off of the first rep there, which is the first two rows. And you can see that I have tomato stakes that I put in the plots, and that's what we used to drape the shade cloth over to make those cute little tents. People were really curious about what I was doing in this field. So the things that I evaluated for the lettuce, we looked at bolting, and this picture shows some different bolting responses. And so the way we measured bolting is shown on the next page. We measured the core length and then divided that by the total head length, and that's how we got the bolting rating. So obviously if the core is like most of the length of the head, you're going to have a really high number there. So a high number is indicative of more bolting. And okay, so this really busy slide is showing the bolting data. And so I don't know if you can see my mouse dancing around up here.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So across the top, that's the shade cloth treatment. And then over here, I have the varieties. So this number down here, 32, that's the average for all of the 22% white shade cloth treatment. So you can see that we had less bolting in both years in the no shade and the white and the low percentage white treatment, which is, we had some stretch, like the plants were not getting enough light, but overall the most significant effect was variety. If you look over here, Arroyo and Salvius. Arroyo is the heat tolerant romaine and Salvius is the heat susceptible one. So the effect of variety was much stronger than the effect of the shade cloth. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, no.
Okay. And so in both years, the shade cloth did not really seem to help with the bolting. I will say that we did not have this picture here is like an extreme example. We didn't have a lot of, we also graded for marketability, and this thing that's bolted here on the right would not be considered marketable. So we did not have a lot of things that fell into this category. And it's probably the way the bolting rating worked out is probably more related to the fact that the plants that were shaded were a little more stretched. So not quite actual bolting, although we did see some of this, but that would have come out in reduced marketable yield. All right. So bitterness is really the proof of the variety, in my opinion, for whether the lettuce survived the heat stress or not. So I have a, this is my scale. I like my scales to mean something. So my scale is 1, the lettuce was good. And I should say I was the one who tasted all the lettuce and rated them as to whether they were, so I like to
Not
be
your family,
consistent.
Emily?
And I don't want to torture my undergraduate employees too badly, otherwise they won't come back for me the next year. So I was the one that tasted all the lettuce. And so my rating scale is 1, it's good, tastes like good lettuce. 2, it's a little bit bitter, but if you put salad dressing on it, you're probably not going to notice. 3, if I bought this, I would be mad. And 4, you should only try to sell this if you don't want these customers to come back. It was real bad. So this chart here is an average of the 2018 and 2019 data. And again, the most significant effect on the bitterness was variety. So the heat tolerant varieties, Arroyo, the heat tolerant romaine was less bitter than the not heat tolerant romaine. And both of the butterhead types, which tend to be less prone to developing bitterness overall, but the heat tolerant one was less bitter than the heat susceptible one, Alkindus. Okay, so this is the most significant effect was with variety, but
Wait, so
there,
would this make you say you wouldn't bother with shade cloth?
well, so there was a significant effect of shade cloth on bitterness. So I would say that, so all the shade treatments came out less bitter than no shade.
Okay.
But the least bitter lettuce was the combination of shade cloth plus a heat tolerant variety.
Okay.
And so, and I would say when this was planted, it was going to get some heat stress, but not extreme heat stress.
Mm-hmm.
And that was somewhat year dependent.
So I guess I'm a little confused because if I would have thought that black and red would be too dark, that they would actually absorb more heat. But
I agree. I also thought that might be a problem. So I'm going to show you. Here, we'll go here next. So soil temperature is really important for lettuce quality. So depending on what crop you're growing, how it is affected by heat stress is different. So some plants like beans and the cucurbit crops, they are really affected by air temperature. So it's the temperature of the air around the reproductive structures that cause the heat stress related like physiological disorders or yield loss or quality problems that we see in those crops. But with lettuce, they think that soil temperature and the temperatures that the roots are experiencing are really important for how the plant experiences heat stress. And so all of the shade cloth treatments reduce soil temperatures on this extremely hot 90-degree day. The critical temperature, as far as they know, for lettuce, which is probably variety dependent, as far as soil temperature, is 77. So none of these treatments managed to keep the soil temperature under 77. But the no shade was 10 degrees over 77 versus like 4 or 5. So this is a big difference or a large effect on soil temperature. And so when you are thinking about lettuce, you should be thinking about things that can reduce soil temperature. The other thing I'm going to point out here, so the lowest temperatures here were the black, which seems a little weird, but what I found was that the black shade cloth doesn't allow, like it doesn't throw the light around, it allows less light in, and that radiation is what causes the soil heating. And the 40% white also was also the same as the black, but this we saw more bolting because of the reduced light transmission. The plants just got a lot taller. I'll go back here. Shade did have a significant effect on the head weight. So we got larger heads with the aluminate and the 22% white. So aluminate, there's a lot more light coming in because it's getting scattered. And the 22% white is just a lower percent shade. It's curious about the red, not sure what's going on there, but it wasn't significantly different than no shade. And then things were a little bit smaller for the black, probably because it was reducing light transmission. So sorting all this out is a little confusing. I agree. The pepper data is much more straightforward. So based on this, what I would say to try is to try 30% black or aluminate shade cloth in combination with the heat tolerant variety. And then consider other ways that you're going to keep the soil cool. You can time your irrigation for soil cool, like to maximize soil cooling during the hottest part of the day. You can use cooling mulches such as like white or aluminized plastic mulch or straw, which is going to be reflective. And I would say as far as value, so the aluminate shade cloth is much more expensive than the black shade cloth, which is why I'd say try using black before the aluminate. And I'm not sure that there's enough an advantage of the aluminate to, at least not here. Like if you were in a low light situation, aluminate might be beneficial. We don't usually have that problem.
Right.
So I think this is my last lettuce slide. So does anybody have any lettuce questions?
Anybody?
Yes. How did you choose the varieties that you use?
So I had done a lot of lettuce trials previously and trialed like 50 some varieties. And so I wanted a heat tolerant variety that was the same type as the heat susceptible variety. And those were
Mhm.
the kind, I grew lettuces. I liked a heat susceptible one and a heat tolerant one
Right.
based on past trials.
My other question is, have you tried anything in midsummer? Any trials in midsummer?
So nobody really tries to grow lettuce then in Delaware. We know we would fail. But this picture, I was going to mention this picture that's up right now is of a what I would say is a demo, like a trial run year of I was looking at the multi-leaf lettuces, Salanova types, some of which are extremely heat tolerant. And the combination of the shade cloth and white plastic mulch, and then the other end of this bed is aluminized plastic mulch. So I was harvesting really good quality lettuce at the beginning of July out of this trial, which is kind of unheard of. And I was for here. I was going to repeat this trial, like do an actual experiment in 2020, but that didn't happen. So, and it didn't happen this year either, but I'm still interested in how this would work since the other trials, they were harvested early June. And like I said, I harvested really high quality lettuce out of here at the beginning of July.
Right. Well, I just for my own use, I grow lettuce all summer, and I have lettuce all summer. But I found that just a couple varieties that seem to work, and I get them from High Mowing, the seed. I know I'm not in Delaware, I'm in New Jersey, but it's pretty damn hot here too.
Yeah.
And I don't use any shade cover. I've never done that, but I have fresh lettuce all summer.
Charlie, what are those varieties?
Nevada and wait, what's the other one? I'll think of it in a minute.
Thanks.
There, on the site-
Nevada is really good, and the other one is I'll tell you in just a minute.
on the site is a chart of all of Emily's test varieties. So if you're curious to know what the range was, she's also provided that data to us.
And I would say if you can get away with not using shade cloth and get what you want, then don't bother with the shade cloth. It's
Well, I never
so
thought about using shade cloth.
so I would say I'm a plant breeder. So my answer to everything is that we need better varieties, but sometimes the better varieties don't come along fast enough. You gotta use something else. So I would say if you have varieties that work and are doing what you want, the easiest solution is almost always a better variety.
Yeah. The other variety is magenta.
I have a lot of success with that too.
I mean, I grow that. I grow that year round, and both of those year round. And using cold frames, I'll have lettuce until probably February.
All
And
right.
it'll start in the cold frames, and then I'll have. But a couple months, I have to go to ShopRite. The rest of the time, I have my own. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
It's fine.
That was very helpful. That was good. All right. So
Okay.
peppers.
Yep. I'm going to talk about peppers. So the same years that I did the lettuce trials, I did trials with tomatoes and peppers. I'm not going to talk very well. This is all the talking I'm going to do about the tomatoes. I did the tomato trial because a colleague at University of Maryland, who's based, does work on the eastern shore of Maryland, so on the Delaware Peninsula, and then on the western shore, so the other side of the Chesapeake Bay. And he had a lot of success using shade cloth to prevent the heat related effects that we see a lot here with tomatoes. So we have ripening problems, which are related to potassium uptake. So yellow shoulders and then internal white tissue are two of the big issues that we see with tomatoes that we're trying to grow during the hot part of the year. I could imagine that maybe, probably in some parts of New Jersey, you never see those problems. But the other thing is that we have sand and all of our plants are just under more stress than most places, except the watermelons, they love it. Okay, so peppers. Again, I was looking at this, for these trials, I was looking at different colors of shade cloth. I did not include the blue shade cloth in this trial because the advertised purpose of the blue is to promote vegetative growth, and peppers and tomatoes are fruiting crops. So I wasn't really interested in producing lots of leaves. The two varieties that I used were Archimedes and Socrates, and so everything was very philosophical. They were transplanted into the field June 5th. This is a bit of a late planting date, but the goal was to look at late planted peppers that would be under a lot of heat stress, like at planting, because that's the time that we usually see a lot of plant loss. And shade was applied on July 2nd, and two harvests, August 1st, or no, harvested from, I know it was more than two harvests, from August 1st through September 20th. And this was a randomized complete block design with 4 applications. Okay, so, and then I graded the peppers into marketable, which would be, and then by size, fancy and number ones, and also, so then the unmarketable categories were unmarketable because of blossom end rot, sun scald, being misshapen or small. So, okay, so for total weight, marketable count, percent marketable weight, and the per fruit weight, and the marketable fruit weight, those were all statistically significantly, there was a significant effect of shade cloth for all of those. We're really interested in the marketable weight here, where 30% black shade cloth was significantly higher in terms of marketable yield, in terms of weight, than all of the other treatments, and all of the shade treatments were significantly higher than no shade. And not surprisingly, there's the same pattern for the number of marketable peppers. So increase the weight in terms of yield and in terms of the number of peppers. And it also increased the percent of the fruit that were marketable, which is really helpful when you don't have to throw away so many peppers and get rid of them. And then this fruit weight is an indication of fruit size. So the shaded treatments were producing larger fruit, especially the black shade cloth and the aluminate. And this is the weight of the marketable fruit. So again, all of the shade treatments producing larger fruit than the no shade treatment. So just to summarize, the 30% black shade cloth increased the number and size of marketable fruit compared to no shade and the other shade treatments. So black. So in this experiment, shade cloth was extremely beneficial in terms of increasing yield and of increasing fruit size and increasing the percent of the fruit that were marketable. And of the shade cloth treatments, 30% black was the best and significantly better than the other colors. And that's handy because black is the cheapest color of shade cloth to buy. Okay, so that's the color experiment. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Am I reading that correctly? That the black was, you got 3 times as much marketable weight?
Oh, sorry. So yes, you're reading that correctly.
Man, that's amazing. I think.
So that, and like, I'll say that's an experiment I did 2 years in a row. The first year, so 2018, there was not, and this is the average of both years.
Mm-hmm.
It was extremely obvious in 2019, which was a year when we had like an incredibly hot and cloudless July.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
That's cool.
Good.
And I should say, like, part of the reason we did this work with peppers is because there's been a lot of work done in Georgia where they are using shade cloth for bell pepper production. And also in the West, I've seen pictures of them using it in Utah. So this is bell peppers are a crop where people have been using shade cloth and found it to be beneficial.
Yeah.
That
Very
means that
impressive.
I should use a black shade cloth on my high tunnel. I used the white one, but
Hey, Emily, can I
Yes.
ask what on the marketable count, what are those units in? Is it a per plot basis or?
Okay, yeah, so the units here are, I'm sorry, it should be more meaningful units, but the count is the number of peppers in a plot and
Per plot, okay,
yeah,
all right.
and this is grams. In this, I think, yeah, there I actually put it in pounds, but that was in grams. So this past year, I was interested in looking at when it was most beneficial to have the shade cloth on the plants. So you'll remember that in the experiments that I did in 2018 and 2019, I did not put the shade cloth on until July. And in some years we have a lot of hot weather in June and the plants might be really stressed, especially when they get planted on black plastic. And we frequently have situations where we lose plants and have to replace them when they're planted onto black shade cloth. So, or sorry, black plastic. I got the shade cloth and the plastic confused. Okay, so this year I was interested in looking at when I should put the shade cloth on and take it off again. Because in the experiments that I just described, I put it on at the beginning of July. July is when we typically have our most intense hot weather. And I took it off in mid-August, which was sort of just as we started picking, I think. So I was curious as to whether there was benefit to putting it on earlier or to taking it off earlier. This chart is showing plant height. So, and so the treatments I had this year were no shade applied at planting or when we transplanted and then taken off at the end of June. So this trial was planted at the beginning of June. And so there was a treatment where shade cloth was applied right after planting and taken off at the end of June, a treatment where it was applied at planting and then taken off at the end of July. There was no shade cloth at planting and we put it on at the beginning of July and then June, July, and only half of August. I didn't keep it on for the entirety of August. Okay, so these are plant heights, and the dates of the plant heights were that we measured were the 1st of July and then July 21st. And the reason we were measuring this is because we were seeing major differences between treatments in plant height, which you can see here, and that they're statistically significant. So in the no shade treatment, the plants were much shorter, and I will say that a lot of them were dead. I should also mention that in this trial, I was looking at 4 different varieties in these plots. I decided to look at some of the colored bells. So I had Aristotle, which is one of the varieties I had used in the past. A yellow bell called Early Sensation, the long red Italian type called a Carmen, and an orange variety that is called Mandarin Perfection. It is not my favorite orange bell pepper, and I don't recommend it. But I couldn't get the seed of the one I wanted. So for those varieties, the shade treatment, so the no shade plants were much shorter in July, and a lot of them were extremely stressed. We had some that died, but actually most of them stayed alive. They just hardly did anything, and you'll see like produce very low yields in the next slide. The plants that were shaded in June got off to a good start. And so basically this treatment at this date, this treatment, and this treatment are exactly the same. So at the beginning of July, there were 3 treatments that had had shade on since the beginning of June, and you can see that their heights are very similar here, here, and here. Okay, and then the plants that got shade put on in July recovered a bit by the time we measured on July 21st, compared to the treatment with no shade, which was still looking pretty rough. And at the end of July, or on July 21st, the June-July treatment and the June-July-August treatment are essentially receiving the same treatment. So we're seeing some big differences in plant height at that point, and it's curious about how this was going to translate into differences in yield. And I spent a lot of today entering data from the yields that we've been collecting over the last several weeks. And I actually graded the last couple bags from what we harvested last week this morning. And so these are the percent marketable and the marketable weight in pounds per plot. The plot has 40 plants in it, so that gives you an idea. I'm going to be harvesting these again at least one more time, perhaps 2 more times. For looking at all of the varieties together, there was a significant effect of shade on the percent of the peppers that were marketable and on marketable weight. And basically the plants, or the treatments that had shade in July were not statistically significantly different from each other at this point, but there's a pretty big difference numerically, which may, with the final harvest, end up being statistically significant as far as the June and July treatments being better than just putting shade on in July. And there is a bigger effect on the bell pepper varieties. So Carmen, the Italian type, is a little more heat tolerant, and it established better than the bell varieties. So there was not as big of a benefit to shade cloth for that particular variety, but for the bell varieties, you can see that the p-values are even lower. So this is even like a indication of greater statistical significance in the differences between the no shade treatment and the shaded treatments. And again, the ones that had shade in June, July versus only June or only July were the ones that looked best in terms of yield and percent marketable. So I think, yep, that's my last slide. So anybody has any questions, I will attempt to answer them. Or you can share your own experiences, which might be more useful than mine.
No, that's pretty awesome. Thank you.
That's very interesting. No wonder I can't get peppers to grow.
Yeah, we gotta use shade cloth.
Too
It's a
much
clear
light.
winner.
Too much light. Well, I've known for years that they always say plant your peppers on the north side of corn rows and so forth. But I guess it makes sense.
I put my peppers in caterpillar tunnels this year for the first time, and there's a certain amount of light protection. I didn't get sun scald, and
Right.
they did really well in the caterpillar tunnel compared to field peppers. I hate growing bells, and they're actually nice this year.
Yeah, there are some of the plastic films that are available for the low tunnels offer some similar benefits to shade cloth. I would say the one thing with shade cloth that's kind of cool is that you can reuse it. And yeah, it rains through it, which has advantages and disadvantages.
This was black shade cloth you were using on the peppers, was it?
Yes, so the experiment that I did this year, it was only with 30% black shade.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, very interesting.
Yeah. Emily, thank you. This
Yes,
is
you're
cool.
welcome.
Yeah, so I'm definitely gonna have to rethink how I'm growing my peppers. Lettuce, I don't know. I just give up in the middle of the summer. I just don't have the will to fight the heat. but I'll try now. I think I'll try. Are there any other questions for Emily? No? Okay, so for those of you who joined late, I apologize because Gabe's grandma had a stroke today, and so he's at the hospital and not online with us. So I appreciate Emily carrying on and helping us out tonight. And I will follow up with Gabe and share his presentation with everyone at a later date. Okay, so I think that's it for tonight.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Emily, thank you. Really, thank you very much. It's very helpful, and it is a reminder that we can work around the challenges of heat with shade cloth and variety, and the combination seems to be pretty cool. So thank you.
Yep, great to talk to you guys.
Okay,
Thank
thanks
you.
for sharing. Have a
Yep.
good night, everyone. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.